All right, friends, it's time to give you loyal listeners a discount on protein powder. You may or may not know, but I launched my very first protein powder 2 years ago. It's a grass-fed beef isolate with only 3 ingredients: grass-fed beef, either organic cacao or organic vanilla, and organic monk fruit. Now, if you don't want any of the added flavor and sweeteners, you can also just get unflavored. And no matter what flavor you choose, you're getting over 23 grams of protein per scoop, which is going to keep you full and satisfied between meals. I love starting my day with a Fab4 smoothie and breaking my fast with that much protein. It makes a serious difference in my cravings and blood sugar balance the rest of the day, and I've seen it with my clients as well. Now, I never thought I'd own a product company, but when I got pregnant with Sebastian, I realized the majority of protein powders were chemically extracted or enzymatically extracted, and I wanted to use heat and water only. I wanted minimal ingredients because we don't need those emulsifiers, fillers, or added vitamins, minerals, and probiotics. All of those additions increase the chances that it's not going to work for your body, whether it be bloating, digestion issues. I just wanted pure, clean protein to keep you full and satisfied so you could build the most delicious Fab4 smoothie. And I have to say, I'm pretty proud of the flavor. If you take a look at our reviews on Amazon, you'll see 5-star reviews for flavor. And that is key, because if you don't love your Fab4 smoothie and you don't love drinking your protein powder, you're not going to do it. It won't become a habit, and it's consistency that outpaces everything. So if you're here and you're listening and you want to give our protein powder a try, use the code podcast5 for $5 off your order. And let me know if you love it. My favorite ways to apply this protein powder is in my Fab4 smoothie, making freezer fudge, making chocolate milk, making hot chocolate, and throwing the unflavored into all my kids' baked goods. So let me know how you use it. Let me know if you love it, and share this podcast deal with your friends. Edwena Kennedy is a pediatric dietitian and a mom of 2. She teaches parents how to confidently feed their babies and toddlers and raise healthy eaters. Edwena cuts through the information overload to provide simple and actionable solutions for feeding kids of all ages, introducing new foods, and raising happy, adventurous eaters. She's the host of the My Little Eater podcast and has launched courses on baby-led feeding and toddler feeding. Let's welcome Edwena to the show. I am so excited to welcome you to the show today. Edwena, thank you for being here to talk about kids' nutrition, picky eaters, the scary things we're trying to feed our babies. No, I'm just kidding. But it's just, you're a wealth of information, and we connected on Instagram, and I just love all that you're doing, and I've sent some clients your way. So I would love to dive into how you got into the field of pediatric nutrition.
Thank you. Okay, first off, before I go there, I do want to say how much I love you and your stuff as well. So I was telling you earlier, but I totally binge every single one of your podcast episodes. So thank you so much for putting that out. So a little bit about me and how I got into this world. Well, I started off as a mom before I actually got into the world of nutrition. I had my first son fairly early on, and I was always very, very interested in nutrition. But at this point, I had just graduated from my previous degree in neuroscience. I had my son. It was I guess, I wouldn't say social media times, but we definitely didn't have the bombardment of all the information and people and the different types of accounts that are on social media. And Instagram was like just becoming popular. So I essentially went through that year feeding my son really intuitively. I had my mom, who's like old school Lebanese, who told me all the things she knew. And then I had my doctor, who told me very little, but I had some of his guidance. And then I had my own intuition and my own basic nutrition knowledge. And so, to be honest, I had an amazing year with him, and things went really smoothly. And that's not to say that I did everything quote unquote right, but it was definitely joyful. Like, I would say we enjoyed our meals and I felt confident and good. Fast forward to having my second son. At this point, I am midway through my nutrition, my dietetics program. I start learning more and more. I'm obsessed with everything that I'm learning, and I'm, realizing all the things that I should have or could have done. I did it all with my second son. Things are going great. One day, I swear it felt like they woke up. I would say they were about 2 and 4 years old. They woke up one day or maybe they were younger. I think they were 1 year younger than that. I think they were 1 and 3. And I honestly felt like they just turned picky. Like they both decided at the exact same time, I don't want to eat anything besides chicken nuggets, fries, and hot dogs, believe it or not. And it wasn't even something that we ever really had in the house, but we tried giving them this, we tried giving them that. They didn't want to eat it. And when this would be like when one of those options would be offered, it was like, yes, I will take it. So of course you can imagine I was stressed out. I was worried. My husband and I were kind of started arguing about what we were going to do. And he would be like, I know his big thing was like, well, obviously they're not going to eat any of the food that we're giving them because it's not kids' food. Like clearly that's the problem. And I knew in my heart, even though I hadn't learned all this stuff yet, I was like, no, I know that kids don't need kids' food. There's no segregation required. And I just felt like that was definitely not the issue. So I started looking for the answers. And so I went to my doctor who basically said, it's a phase and wait it out. And this is just normal. Essentially, there's no problem here. But I know even from talking to tons of my clients, like they all say they either hear that or they hear, just expose them to more fruits and vegetables or whatever foods you want them to. But it's not a plan. There's no information beyond that. It's like how. And again, I went online and it was just this crazy overwhelm. So I decided to dig into the research. And I dedicated the next 2 years of my life literally constantly researching and implementing with my own kids. And I started doing it with my clients until I kind of figured out the formula in terms of the step-by-step process. Because I found, like, for me, if I was to explain what I learned in my program, my nutrition dietetics program, I learned everything about what to feed. I knew, how much iron do babies need and how many ounces of milk and how much fiber do toddlers need and how do you build the balanced plate? I knew all that, but I had no idea how to get them to eat that. Yeah. So that was the part that when I looked into the research, there's actually quite a bit out there, but it's all very convoluted. Some of it's conflicting and a lot of it is, of course, for somebody without a nutrition background, would be very, very hard to learn. Very, very hard to decipher what does that mean and how do I apply that to real life. So that was sort of how my mission was born. I thought that if I struggled this much trying to find answers and a plan, then I'm sure tons of parents out there who didn't have the time or didn't have that, that background struggled even more. So that was my plan. I basically, started with my online courses. And it's been a few years and been running those. And really the whole mission is to bring confidence to parents when they're feeding and raising healthy eaters and to remove that stress, remove that overwhelm, and just bring joy back to feeding.
I love that. I love that when you were naive about everything and you had your first child, your first son, that you just got to have fun and that you were eating together. I would love for you to kind of go through what you just touched on, which is there's this point in your life where your 1 and 3 year old just decide like, I'm not eating this stuff anymore. And there's one approach there. And then the other thing you mentioned was the how of getting your kids to eat healthy. Can you kind of break it down for, I'm sure the moms listening and the dads tuning in, all of a sudden their kid woke up and said, yeah, I've eaten broccoli my whole 2.5 years of life. And I have decided 2.5 years plus a day that I do not eat broccoli anymore. How do we get them back to that? What's your experience in the how? Because we're obviously not shoving the broccoli down their throat.
Yeah, exactly. So I think assuming we've had a solid foundation, so we're probably going to get into some of that. What does a solid starting solids foundation look like? But let's assume all things went well. You did all the, again, quote unquote, right thing, up to date, this and that. And things were going well, then all of a sudden they just hit this picky stage, which by the way is very normal. It is something that I actually tell every parent, expect it to come. And that doesn't mean you're doomed. It doesn't mean that we have to put up all these alarms and freak out and start worrying. Really, what I think the best thing that parents can do is follow what I like to call a toddler-led feeding approach. So if we think about some of the research, again, we may get into it, about what is working for babies. It's really about letting babies lead. It's about letting them listen to their hunger and fullness cues. It's about offering them the variety and letting them choose from there. So you have your roles as a parent, you're choosing what foods to serve. You're choosing where you're going to serve it. You're choosing when you're going to serve it. And then your baby totally decides within that context if I'm going to eat and how much I'm going to eat. Essentially, that's the simplified premise. But what happens is all of us are sudden, our babies become toddlers, right? And
power.
Yes. So there's like two factors. So they start to show a little bit more independence. They're more opinionated. They want to express what they like, what they don't like, all of this kind of thing starts to happen. And in conjunction with that, we as parents, it's very natural for us to fall into this, by the way, but we all of a sudden stop trusting that they know how much they need to eat and they can choose. And we're just providing structure, because if you think about even breastfeeding, we're so easily trusting our baby to drink as much milk as they need. And when they're done, that's it, But as they hit toddlerhood, we're like, no, you don't know anymore what you need for your body. There's no way those 2 bites were enough for you, or there's no way that second helping is what you need. Like, that's way too much food. I'm going to have to restrict you, or, a whole slew of different issues that we start to actually do, believe it or not, that make things worse. So I guess what I want to say is that picky eating, in terms of like just general run-of-the-mill picky eating, so we're not talking about very, very serious issues here. This is all normal, and expect it to happen, that you're going to see a little bit of, maybe a year, a couple years, 3 years at most, maybe, of just kind of this, I don't know what I like today. Okay. The most important thing you can do as a parent is maintain your role, maintain your confidence, keep that structure where you are choosing what to serve. Okay. So that means no catering. That means serving the same foods you're eating. That means ideally variety, right? So you can do all the things that you want in terms of choosing, what fruit am I going to put out today? What vegetable am I going to put out today? What texture or, whatever meal do I want him to or her to experience? That's all in your realm. And then you're also choosing when to serve that food. So especially once they hit about 1 year of age up, we want to have them on a general feeding schedule. It's not a rigid thing down to the minute, but it's definitely routine, so that they can learn, this is an eating opportunity. This is when I this is when I can fill my belly up all the way. And then I'm going to wait a period of maybe it's like a couple hours, 2.5 hours, something like that. Then we have another eating opportunity that gives me time for my belly to, for my hunger to start to build up. I eat again. And then you have this routine, and you're actually teaching them how to mindfully eat, if really at the end of the day, that's what's happening. So that's the other thing we do. And then the third thing is we are choosing where food is served. So we are the ones who say, ideally, it's at the family table. And there's going to be exceptions. Sometimes it might be a picnic in the living room. Sometimes it might be outside, at the park. But most nights we're sitting down, we're at the family table, we're all eating together, and it's a family event. And we're not, letting our toddler choose, well, I'm going to take a bite and then leave the table, play a little bbit. Maybe I'll follow them, give them a little bite while they're playing, or, just letting them dictate, maybe I want to eat in front of the TV or things like that. Right. So within that context, those roles, those are ours. And I want parents to remember to keep that going. And then again, keep it going with that trust that you're going to let your toddler totally choose if they want to eat from what you've provided them and how much. Sounds so much simpler said than done. I know that because when you're worried about growth, or when you're worried about them not, only eating the piece of bread for 3 meals in a row, and you're like, okay, no, now we have to do something. I understand that that's stressful, and it causes us to want to interfere. But the research shows, experience definitely shows, if you let it kind of run its course, and you look at how much they're eating, what they're eating over the span of something larger, like more like a week, something longer, I should say like a week, versus a day or meal to meal, how much they're eating or what they're eating, then you're actually going to see that when you have that structure in place, they're getting all the nutrients they need. And their appetites are naturally going to fluctuate. You'll have some days where they have a couple bites, or maybe a meal where it's a couple bites. And then you'll have a snack where they ate like 2 servings. And then you might have a normal sized lunch. And then you might have nothing really at dinner. But that's okay, because the next day it might be slightly different, or you know what I mean? And they get what they need over that full time span. So that's the main overlying piece of advice that I have. And then within that, there's a whole bunch of nuances for sure.
I love that so much. It's resonating with me, because I think about our meal times, and Sebastian has to sit in his chair for meal times. And we're in a kind of a funky situation. We're renting my in-laws' old house, and we don't have a kitchen table here. So we have bar stools and hit a little clip-on chair for Sebastian, and he has his kitchen stool, and he always likes to stand in his kitchen stool. Like that would be his preference for everything. Like, let me stand. And he knows, like, no, like mealtime, mom and dad sit in the bar stools and you sit in the chair that's connected to the bar. And like, it's like a non-negotiable. And I think when you give a toddler, like even just an inch, they'll try to sneak a mile. They're like, but yesterday you let me have breakfast in my standing tower. So today I get breakfast in my standing tower. And you're like, good negotiating tactic, but no, it's really like holding those boundaries, and he'll get to have his snacks in the standing tower outside at his table, or, in the backyard. But it's like a non-negotiable for me that he sits in that little chair, but it's like having those boundaries or setting that is, I don't know, he doesn't fight it as much, because I've been hard with that boundary. And it's interesting. Like, he knows we sit down, and if he eats a meal, then, that expected mealtime, expected snack time is also a game changer, I think. And you just see this work, and I'm sure you've seen it too. Like, you learn everything in school and you understand the science of it, and but there's still a part of you that's like, just take one more bite. Just take one more bite of the protein, bud. It's crazy. I mean, I catch Chris. I caught him the other day, and it's like the thing he used to do is like, when Bash was little, he'd be like, beaver bite. And he'd put his like hands up by his face, like big beaver teeth or whatever, and be like, be one more beaver bite, like full dog and pony show, And I'm like, in the research for this, I'm like, absolutely not. We can't do beaver bites anymore. This is crazy, man. You just got to put it out. If he decides he's done, he's done. His body's not growing as fast as it did in the first 18 months.
Exactly. That's like such a great point. You brought up a lot of important things that I think, again, seem like, oh yeah, of course that makes sense, but harder to implement than it is to actually just talk about it. But one of the things is, yes, as you mentioned, so when they hit toddlerhood, they're primarily, I guess, they're not growing like they did when they were babies. If you think about from 0 to 12 months of age, their main job literally was to put on weight. That is their survival mechanism. Put on weight, grow. They're growing at such a rapid pace. They're eating regularly. They're eating a lot. They're eating, sleeping, pooping, essentially. Once they hit that toddler stage, what's happening? If you think about like evolutionarily, what is prioritized, it's actually learning about their environment. It's about learning how to socialize, learning how to talk, learning how to walk, all of these things that are totally outside of actually growing, right? And putting on weight. So you're naturally going to see appetite decreases. So again, this is one of those things that I think if parents expect it's going to happen, it may kind of calm them down a little bit so that they're not freaking out when it does happen. So expect that appetite will go down. Appetite will be finicky and fluctuate a lot day to day, week to week. And that they also won't be putting on weight at the same rate that they were before, right? So many parents are like, they haven't gained weight in 2 months. I don't know what to do. I'm like trying to shove food in, basically every minute of the day. And I'm like, that's okay. You're not going to see that. I bet you in a month or 2 months or whatever, you're going to see like a little spurt of growth. And that's what you should expect. So that's one thing. And you also brought up the kind of topic of boundaries, which is so critical when you are working with toddlers, because as you said, so they're definitely more independent and they now are much more aware. So they're sensing what rules and structures are actually in place here and who's actually in control, right? So it's so important to have something that, again, when you have that confidence, I'm doing the right thing, and I don't have to worry about the nitty gritty details. I'm just here to set the structure. Then they also feel, oh yeah, okay, I'm in this secure environment. I know exactly what I can and can't do. I know the parameters, and they're going to test it. That's their job, right? This is part of their growth, I guess, their period that they're going through is they're going to test and see, hey, is this a movable boundary? Is this something that maybe I could, take over? No? Okay. Let me try over here. Can I have some control over here? No? Okay. But, if you tell them you do have control over how, do you want to eat with your hand or do you want to eat with your fork? Do you want to eat the broccoli or do you want to eat the corn? Do you want, that's where they can exert that control, but you maintain those other boundaries really firmly. That's the key. I find that the more and more toddlers, like you said, if you almost have, and I don't want to say exceptions can never be made, but it's almost like the more an exception's made, that just registers in their mind that, oh, okay, I guess maybe I can. That is a shaky, kind of wobbly, not so strong boundary that's there, right? Or last time mom let me do that when I did this, screamed at the top of my lungs and said, I don't want to sit at the table or whatever it is. So I'm going to try it again. And so there's this little bit of balance that needs to happen between, I guess, understanding that if you let go of that fear that your toddler's not going to eat. So for example, a lot of parents will say, okay, well, they're only going to eat then if I let them stand up and run around, right? If you have it instilled in you, or if you have it kind of practiced that it's okay that they leave the table and don't want to eat this meal because I'm maintaining this boundary and they chose within that boundary, I am not going to eat. That's okay. Then you will see, again, things will get better over time. But if we start giving in and to our fear, then we're going to loosen up those boundaries and you're going to see more and more problems start to happen.
I love that. I know it's the hardest thing as a parent to have strong lines for things and to have boundaries, especially, depending on how you were raised. I always talk to my clients about their relationship with food based on how it was passed down to them. Was food celebration? Is food being used to soothe us? And I had 24-hour access to the cabinets, all the Costco snacks. And I was I'm going to turn on, a Disney movie and feed myself whatever I want. And there was, that was just the way it was. And we definitely sat down for meal times, but I wasn't always hungry because I could just decide when I wanted to eat. And there were no boundaries around that. And I think, I don't know, I definitely, it resonates with me so strongly that these boundaries need to be hard and we need to be confident in them because you're going to they might push up against you a couple times and they're like, oh, mom's tough. And this is the deal. And I'm going to fall in line on this. But I do have flexibility in my decision making at mealtime. I love that so much. Let's go back. You kind of mentioned it. And I know it's what I want this podcast to be about is the research in the different types of feeding and how we get started with kids and introducing foods. I think you have talked about on Instagram and through your courses a little bit about textures and progressing people with textures. And it was the first time where I was yes, baby-led, and someone needs to recognize the fact that baby-led weaning is scary for people. That people aren't introducing certain foods because they're absolutely petrified that their child is going to choke or they don't know how to, or their mom's what are you talking about? You're not pureeing your baby's food. So can you talk about the types of feeding and, what is a solid start for kids and what, how do we get our kids eating and when and all the details? Let's get into it.
So much to know, I feel. So let's start with the basics of what are the two main methods of starting solid. So we'll start with the easy one. That's puree feeding. That's the traditional method that probably, your grandparents fed your parents like that, and your parents probably fed you like that, which is purees, mashed up, very soft solids on a spoon fed by the parent. In a nutshell, right? And typically, there's been no more rules beyond that. It's kind of once you feel like you want to offer some more table foods, go for it. But it usually traditionally would happen closer to 1 year of age. Some parents would wait a little bit longer. Some parents might do it a couple months before. But even the foods that were traditionally introduced were very simple, maybe Cheerios or something that maybe nowadays puffs, the little kind of non-nutritive, totally lacking any nutrition and also texture, there's no texture there. So you're kind of just putting it in your mouth, it dissolves and then that's it, it's gone. So there's no ability to practice, their oral motor skills. So that's kind of the puree feeding method traditionally. And then we've got the baby-led weaning method, And I call this the new method, but it's been around for about 15 years, still something that so many parents are just discovering for the first time. And in a nutshell, again, what it is that instead of you feeding your baby, you're allowing your baby to self-feed. That's kind of the main premise. Now, if we're thinking about, all right, well, if a baby's going to self-feed, what can they feed on? They don't know how to pick up a spoon. They're not going to be eating mushy textures. They're going to need big whole pieces that they can actually hold in their hand, right? Because they only have their palmar grasp in those early, like around 6 months of age. And they're going to bring that to their mouth and they're going to learn on their own how to eat. Now, there are so many benefits, to be honest, with this method. Mainly, the ones that I love the most is that it gives so much oral motor skill development. Meaning, so if we think about oral motor skills, thinking about how you move your tongue back and forth, like up and down, left and right, how you use your cheek muscles, how you use your jaw, how you chew, how you swallow, all of those are skills, right? And when you are offering more textured foods, more advanced textures, your baby has that opportunity from early on to actually practice all of those skills. So by the time, again, thinking about a baby who's only had purees for so long, and then all of a sudden you introduce them to a piece of chicken, they're not going to know how to handle that. It's going to feel weird in their mouth. They're going to totally refuse it. Plus all the normal toddler behavior that we already talked about, right? Yeah. Combining all that, and all of a sudden we have this strike where they're like, nope, I'm only eating purees. Mm-hmm. So that's a big thing. The other thing with baby-led weaning that I like is that it is really exposing them to more variety typically. Now, this isn't a rule. And I'm going to go back to this when we talk about how we're not really doing everything the way they're intended to be done. Yeah. But what typically it kind of more easily happens with baby-led weaning is because you're more often offering foods that you're eating at the table, modified versions of foods you're eating, you are exposing them to more flavors and again, more textures, right? We know that when we start babies off, especially between like 6 and 9 months of age, on a variety, and I'm talking like give them all the different spices and give them the citrus flavors and give them the bitter and the umami and all of that, that's going to really prime their palate to have a great baseline moving into toddlerhood. And again, we want to keep that going, but that's going to be the perfect foundation for them. But outside of just the flavors, also it's the textures. Remembering, we want them to experience what is a crispy or a mushy or a crumbly texture? What are the differences between those? And then give them that practice. The other thing that I really like about baby-led weaning is that typically, again, we have baby and mom or dad or whatever, the rest of the family members sitting and eating at once at the same time because baby's doing the feeding themselves. It's not required like with puree feeding where usually mom or dad are feeding the baby, then they finish their meal and then they start and eat their meal, right? So it's more of a family kind of mealtime environment. Now, if you look at what's happening online, because I feel like this is really important to bring up because you'll see that, yes, there's been so much research on baby-led weaning in the past few years. And yes, there's so many benefits. But what you see is this war online, honestly, between parents, between experts, in the media, they sensationalize different things like saying that this is the one method to go with. Yeah. And then there's the people who say, no, that's not the method. Pureeing is the method to go with. Because guess what? I can't expect my babies to just dive into the deep end and just eat all these different foods without helping them get there. Like, are you crazy? And again, like they're going to choke on these foods and this doesn't make any sense to me, or I'm scared. And I think that's an important thing to know is that we all have a right to our own feelings. And if you're feeling anxious, that can be very terrifying to just be like, here's a drumstick, here's a, sweet potato, here's a whatever. No, like we need to also kind of think about like there's parents who don't feel comfortable. And again, some babies also don't even feel like they're ready or they don't know what to do with the finger foods, right? There's some babies, I've come across many actually, that are closer to about 8 months of age before they really start to take to finger foods. Does that mean we shouldn't offer them any solids in the meantime, or they should go all this time without getting any real nutrition in? I don't believe so. Online, you may hear, yes, you have to be a purist, you have to only offer the finger foods or you only offer the purees and it is what it is. And there's this war. But for me, I'm like, no, what we really want to do is we want to follow our baby's cues. Okay. So I am a huge proponent, and this is what I talk about in my baby-led feeding method. It's almost like a combination, if you will, or start where you want. It doesn't have to be a mixed approach, but it's about taking the good from each one. It's about starting where you're comfortable. It's about also reading your baby's cues and seeing where do they want to start. Do they take to the spoon and to the pureed food? Or are they taking to those finger foods? Are they grabbing? Are they really wanting to go at it? Those are all factors that you need to consider when it comes to how you want to start your baby on solids, right? Now, I want to backtrack really quickly and just mention that the other thing that I notice that's happening, so this is all causing a lot of stress. It's causing a lot of overwhelm for parents, right? And so they freeze and they have no idea what to do. But what also I see is happening is that sometimes parents are so happy that they're doing, again, what we think or what some people say is the best method of starting solids. Let's say baby-led weaning. Oh my gosh, it's amazing. Okay, well, when we really look at what they're doing, maybe they're giving them finger foods to feed on, but they're the same textures, the same types on repeat. So they're not getting a lot of variety and flavors. They're actually getting sweet potato, avocado, and banana.
Broccolini.
Yeah, broccolini. Maybe it's like a month and a half in, they're still got the same things on rotation. Maybe they've got a rice rusk thrown in there and that's it, right? Or maybe a couple more, but it's really not the variety that we want. And it's not an advanced texture. We've got only those soft, mushier textures. We don't know what they don't know what ground beef tastes like or what that mouthfeel is like. So that part, isn't being implemented. Or maybe, again, they're feeding their baby, but they're not eating with their baby. So they're not taking those premises, like the things that are actually beneficial that the research shows. Or maybe they're pressuring. And this is something I see so often because with baby-led weaning especially, they're not getting in what looks like anyway the same quantity in the early few weeks, maybe couple months, because they're learning how to take a bite. How do I chew? How do I swallow this? So parents freak out, of course, natural. And then we're like, no, come on, like eat a bite, try this. Take a little taste of this. This one's so good. Oh, let's do that. They'll keep them at the table for an hour because they just are waiting for one more bite, things like that. And so what I want to say is that I think what's important, the real takeaway here is it doesn't matter how you start. Go with what works for you and your family. What matters is if you look at what the research says, it's advancing your baby in textures. So there's a research around babies who have been introduced to lumpy and more kind of chewy textures before 9 months of age have shown a reduced rate of picky eating later in life. And they follow them up to 7 years of age. And they've seen a significant difference and a lot more feeding problems that happen when they've been introduced to those textures later. So if you're starting with purees, okay, let's just progress them along in texture so that by 9 months of age, they're getting all the variety, right? But you can start off easing in and make yourself feel better and give your baby some practice. That's fine. Again, sit with your family. Doesn't matter if you're doing purees or if you're doing baby-led weaning. Let's sit down and try and eat together, The other thing that the research says is so, so important, which people think it can only be accomplished with baby-led weaning, is responsive feeding. So that's the concept of, again, your baby has these cues that they give off all the time. So whether they're hungry or whether they're full, whether they're bored with their meal, whether they're feeling too challenged by the meal, the pace of the meal, like how fast do they want to eat? Do I want to take slow bites and take my time? Or, are they like opening their mouth right away and waiting for the next bite?
Those are my kids.
Yeah, exactly. That was mine too. So those are all cues that we want to be responsive to. And the research shows that when we're responsive, so it doesn't matter, again, if we're doing spoon feeding, if our baby opens their mouth, we're ready and prepared to give them that food, great. Or if our baby's turning their head, they're pushing food off of their tray, they're finicky and fussy, those are signs that they're done eating. We were not going to try and push that, force that spoon in, or thinking about finger foods, we're not going to try to coax them to come on, take a bite, hold this, look at this, oh my God. And we're just making this big theatrical, performance trying to get our baby to take one more bite. So those are the things that I think if you're focused on that, who cares about all these rules? Forget the black and white. Yeah. And do what works for you. And so my big thing is the baby-led feeding method, like I said, starting where you and your baby feel comfortable, but advancing your baby from there. That's the part that I really want to make sure is more implemented. Because to avoid all those problems, again, we need to gently nudge our baby along. So I developed what I call the texture timeline. It's just a tool that I have inside of my course, but I talk a lot about it on Instagram. I have blogs. Essentially, I take parents who decide they want to start off slow. So again, some parents might say, no, I want to just dive into baby-led weaning, all the textures, all the foods. Awesome. But if you want to start off slow, then you have that option using my texture timeline to kind of, it goes through phases like phase 0, phase 1 foods, phase 2 foods, phase 3 foods that gently start to progress them in textures and gives them a general, again, loose timeline around how long you should kind of be hanging out there so that you're not getting stuck for weeks or months on end. And what are the signs to look for that your baby's ready to advance, right? Because that's another thing. So sometimes we're happy and, oh my God, our baby's eating some thick, creamy textures. That's phase 1 of the timeline, let's say. So they're having like hummus texture, and they're having a thick, full fat Greek yogurt, right? Awesome. They're happy. They think, okay, great, I'm on phase 1. But guess what? If our baby, let's say, is swallowing that with ease, no gagging is happening. They're kind of just even started getting passive at meal times. So they're not engaging. It's almost like it's just going in, swallow, going in, swallow. They're not even thinking about it. They're not really present. Those are all signs that your baby is skilled and totally fine, and you need to move them on. You need to advance them. So things like that will help parents just kind of have those cues to say, okay, it's ready for it's time for the next phase. And then at the same time, if your baby's struggling, let's say you want to do finger foods, or even if you do purees and it's like a minced or kind of mixed texture, and your baby's gagging significantly, which, by the way, gagging is totally fine, and we may get into it later on, but I'm talking about significant gagging and to the point that your baby's uncomfortable and they can't continue a meal. Okay, I would say, I know you want to do finger foods and I know you want to do this type of finger food, but your baby's telling you there's something, they're struggling. So let's take it a step back. Let's just go one phase back and test this. Or let's advance this texture by doing this little tweak so that they can get used to it, they can feel comfortable, and then again, you move them on. So it's kind of, used as a guide to progress your baby in textures in a timely manner.
I love it. No, I thought it was really interesting and a non-dogmatic, very approachable way for people to start slow, but also make sure they're moving along and graduating and getting into those textures before the 9-month mark. Because I think, if there's anything we've seen is that exposure and modeling and all of this is the most important thing for our kids to prevent that picky eating, even if they turn around at a certain age and decide they don't like something, having that foundation. So let's talk about the foundation of baby-led weaning and finger foods for people who are ready for it. What are some staple foods that you find are easy starts for moms and dads and caregivers and everybody, but also, what are some shapes and sizes that we should be looking out for? Because I think, again, it's that fear, I think, that holds a lot of people back. It's, you bring your child home without a degree in parenting and you're like, I have to keep you alive. And so introducing real food is always well, this is making it scary to keep you alive. So it's a real fear. And that's really a big thing with Chris and I am all about here's a big piece of broccolini and here's a, meat on the bone. And Chris is I can't be in here for this. At certain points, he's I can't watch. And I'm okay, that's fine. I am 100% watching. Or, hey, I'm going to use a mixed technique to make this a little bit more comfortable for you, mincing down the protein and mixing it with thinned avocado. But can you talk to me about sizing for babies that's safe and some of your favorite foods that moms and dads can try to introduce those textures or those big pieces of food?
For sure. Okay, so let's start with the sizing. So when we think about when our baby's developmentally ready to start solids, and again, this is for purees and finger foods, doesn't matter the method. Generally, it's around 6 months of age, okay? And this is the point when babies can sit up, independently. They have good core stability. They are reaching for food. They're interested in food. Their digestive system is ready. There's a whole slew of signs. So when we get there, what we typically see developmentally is babies have what we call the Palmar grasp. So this is essentially the ability to pick up a piece of food using their palms. They'll kind of wrap their fingers and their thumb around something. And then they can bring that food or object, a large object, they do that to their mouth. And they gnaw on it, they suck on it, they lick on it, and eventually chew and eat. So if you're thinking about the types of foods that will work for that easiest, you're going to want long, usually finger-shaped pieces of food. Now, there's going to be exceptions. Not every food you offer has to be a perfect finger shape, but you want it large enough that your baby can easily grab onto it. So typically, I like to have it at least 2 to 3 inches long, at least. So it could be longer than that. I basically kind of use the guide of, if it's in your baby's hand, do you have a little piece sticking out, on either side of their palm that they could actually access the food and take bites out of it if they wanted to? Because if it's too short, obviously they're going to wrap their palm around it. I don't know if all the listeners can actually picture this, but they're going to wrap their palm around it and it's going to be hidden in their palm, and they're not going to know, they don't have that ability to know, oh, if I open my palm, it's in there. So we want it visible. And then they can bring it up to their mouth. They can turn their palm either way, whatever, and be able to access the food. So that's in the beginning. Then as they, move on in months, around 8, 9 months of age, they start getting their pincer grasp, which is when they use their index finger and their thumb to be able to pick up smaller pieces of food. So that's when you can transition to some bite-sized food. I recommend doing finger foods, long finger shapes and bite-sized at that time. You're not going to go exclusively bite-sized, but you can also introduce other types of foods that maybe they couldn't get before that, maybe small grains of rice, or again, pieces of ground meat that are just kind of, thrown on the high chair tray and they can pick up. So when it comes to, so that's a size. Now, when it comes to the types of food that I like to offer, my biggest thing is iron, high iron foods. And the reason why I say this is because babies' iron stores, I know I've heard you talk about this before too, but babies' iron stores start to deplete anyway, around 6 months of age. So if you think about before, when baby's in mom's womb, they're building up the iron stores, they're getting the iron from mom, and they generally have enough stores to last them to about, again, 6, 7 months of age. And that's when you start to notice it's depleting. And that's when we have to get supplemental iron from our diet. We have to be able to provide that to our baby through food, because we can't produce iron on our own. We have to get that from an outside source. And babies' iron needs are extremely high. So they need about 11 milligrams a day, which is more than an adult male's iron needs. And it's just really high. So that's why my big focus is, if you're even doing 1 meal per day, start them with a high iron food. You can have other foods there as well. I think, like we talked about exposure. We want to have a produce. We want to have a high fat source. We want to have iron, but definitely keeping that iron source at least, my preference is every meal, but at least twice per day, right?
I'm like over here fist bumping, because it's just because kids get picky, and like everything I talk to with my clients are like, my kids don't eat protein. And I'm like, that's literally like delivering nutrients and oxygen to every cell in their body. And it's keeping their brain and like functioning at the highest level.
Wow, like
I
the
get so scared.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's so important, is because even outside of iron, again, we need to give them that exposure to those critical macronutrients. Like we have to, or the foods that have high levels of those macronutrients, right? So if we're giving them sweet potato, which is awesome, by the way, but if we're only or mostly giving sweet potato and oatmeal and whatever,
yes, avocado.
You know what I mean? Avocado, exactly. So many people are like, oh, I'm doing pears now, and we're doing, I did applesauce and I did this. I'm like, great, but where's your iron again? And where's your fat? So I think those are two things that I think are worth kind of emphasizing as foods to introduce early and often. And like I said, I think every single meal should have them, because it's so easy to think of the carbohydrate rich foods, which are energy rich and are amazing. But again, those are the nutrients we really want to focus on. So let's just go with a baby or a parent who's okay with introducing any food, right? Yeah. I actually love introducing chicken thighs as one of the first foods. It's, again, really rich in iron, or a drumstick. So Parents might freak out over this, and maybe it's not day one, meal one, but a few weeks in for sure. Give them a whole drumstick, meat on a bone, which, by the way, is not a choking hazard. The bone itself is not a choking hazard because it's so big. There's no way you could bite into that. There's no way they're going to bite into that. That is not going to break off in this small piece and get lodged in their throat. Now, the meat, though, the reason why I like that is because, again, iron-rich meat, but also super moist and super easy for your baby to eat, believe it or not. So if you think about a chicken thigh, I have, sometimes I'll take videos of me squishing down what that meat looks like. And I'm always amazed, to be honest. I'm like, oh my God, it literally disintegrated in between my fingers. If I squish down on a piece of chicken thigh that's especially just, pulled out of especially like a slow cooker, or even if it's roasted, I squeeze down and it just is so soft, and you apply just a bit of pressure and it will disintegrate. You kind of rub your finger and your thumb together and you see like, oh my goodness, this really is easy to mash down. And if you think about babies and their strong gums, so a lot of people think, oh, they need teeth. My baby doesn't have teeth yet. There's no way they could break that down. No. Their gums are super strong and their teeth are sitting just underneath the surface of their gums. And if you've ever had your hand or your finger bitten by a baby, you know how strong they are.
Or your nipple. Not fun.
Yeah, not fun at all. So that's going to be all they need. And they're going to be able to break that down. So chicken thighs, one of the best ones, I think. Also, any type of like ground, maybe like lamb or beef or, any type of ground red meat, I think is going to be, again, really great iron source, and typically juicier, typically more moist, and that's going to be easier for your baby to actually eat. The other food that I like is I feel like a lot of people have been loving the suggestion lately. So I'm going to throw this one out. A chickpea or a lentil based pasta, or like a pea-based pasta, something like that. Just because, again, a lot of parents who are nervous will actually cook it, like boil it to way past al dente, but it's soft and it's mushy and it's got a high iron source, right? So ideally you're finding one that is just very minimal ingredients. Like ideally it's just the chickpea flour or whatever it is. And offering that to your baby is also going to be another good one.
What's your favorite noodle type for babies?
So you're, again, thinking about what's going to be easiest for them to hold. I personally like a penne noodle, but a lot of people like giving rotini noodles or egg noodles because they're, again, longer, flat, long, easier to hold. I just find that they break apart a bit easier. That's the only thing. So no perfect way, again, no perfect shape. It's about what's easy for your baby to eat, right? And I think, again, the variety is important. So if your baby always sees, this is the shape that I get, and I've only gotten this shape, oh my goodness, what does this noodle look like? When you present them with something new, they're going to be like, nah, that's not what I eat.
That's not my pasta, Mom.
No. Yeah. So I typically like, a penne, rotini, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I think like an organic, non-GMO tofu, like tofu pan fried or baked tofu is also really soft, like just a medium or firm. Firm is going to be easier for it to keep together again. That would also be a nice high iron source. If you're looking for non-meat, non-heme, like source of iron, and you want just a plant-based one. And again, beans in their natural form. So it's going to be hard in the beginning for them to pick up, right? Because we talked about they only have palmar grasp, around 6 to 8, 9 months of age. So what you can do is you can mash the beans and you can spread it on a piece of toast, or you can spread it on even meat. Like, honestly, the combos don't have to make sense to you, but like any vehicle that you can find that you want to just spread that on, like go for it. You can dip the broccoli in the bean spread, right? And offer that to your babies just so that they're getting, again, that high iron.
Thinking outside of like the normal mealtime box and thinking about the normal outside of the normal combination is so important for parents, because I personally think like breakfast is an opportunity to serve up a vegetable, and people are like, what are you talking about? I'm like, look, I have roasted veggies from the night before. I have like steamed veggies from lunch or crudité or whatever it is. And I'm like, hey, well, we're just going to throw this on here, and people are like, what? It's not the pancakes or the waffle and or the yogurt. And I'm like, no, it's like chicken soup from last night, but we're doing it. But that's because I've had children with food allergies. So I have to think outside of the egg box, and I don't want to serve my kids up a bunch of high carbohydrate, sugary options for their first meal of the day.
I love that. I'm obsessed with that. And I also totally prescribe to that as well. They don't know what breakfast food is. They have no idea, right? It's a meal. And again, it's what you get them used to. And it's what's easy for you. And it's about what nutrients are they delivered, all that. So I love that you do that. And you're not like just kind of boxing in like you said, just these standard, what you would typically think of for a breakfast food or for a snack. It's anything goes. And also the egg you mentioned, which I don't know how I forgot. That's an amazing first food. Amazing. With the egg yolk having the high iron in that. Again, it's a high protein food. It's versatile.
I'm totally on board for that too. I mean, I love everything that you have been doing and putting out into the world. And I love that you're giving moms and dads and caregivers like the confidence to feed their babies. When it comes to outside of baby-led weaning, traditional weaning, the sizes, the shapes, the types of foods. What do you think about involving your kids in the cooking and the preparing and all of that? Like, what's your advice to parents when it comes to like getting their kids involved at mealtime and encouraging and modeling behaviors?
I honestly think it's one of the most important things you can do. I think that if kids only experience food in the context of just nourishment, which is great, but there's so much more to it. And it helps so much. I can't even tell you with picky eating, preventing picky eating and managing picky eating. And I throw this suggestion out a lot. And I think it sounds daunting to a lot of parents. Like, oh my God, are you kidding me? Like, I'm going to have my toddler in here, like making a mess and slowing me down. But I have done this with my kids since they were very young. And I found that anytime they would come, into this phase where like beets, oh my God, I struggled with beets so much for a period of time. And I said, okay, that's it. Like I had to just get programmed about it. And I was like, okay, next 2 weeks, we're working on beets. This is the thing. And I started in the kitchen and I did like a bunch of food exploration activities, which by the way, is basically just, you can do it through cooking with the food and getting them to touch the food, feel the food, smell it, learn about it in the kitchen, all that kind of thing. But also you could do it away from the table or I should say away from mealtime or the kitchen. You can set up an activity on its own, standalone activity where they explore that food, where they like smell it. What does that smell like? Oh, okay. Yeah, you're right. Or no, I kind of think it smells like this. Or oh, well, what texture is it? And they might not want to touch it with their fingers. That's okay. Here, take this little fork and let's poke it in. What texture? Is it soft or is it hard? Is it red? Is it big? Is it small? Whatever. So you're kind of exploring food. That, I'm telling you, works wonders for picky eating. And it's so easy to do when they're in the kitchen. It's so easy. Anytime can you grab me the green pepper from the fridge? Which one's the green one? Oh my goodness, good job. And they bring it over. Okay, let's wash it. Ooh, it feels really smooth, like you're washing the pepper. Okay, you're bringing it back. And I actually am a huge proponent of giving them knives, like kids say, like you can start with a butter knife or you can buy like there's kid safe knives that you can purchase honestly as soon as they're ready to hold it. Like there's no danger with them. So I think give it to them, let them like take a banana, something really soft and just let them chop, let them play, let them mush. And then as they hit even 18 months to 2 years of age, you can give them an actual real knife. I know some people think I'm absolutely crazy, but I firmly believe it's like what we entrust our kids to be able to do, they rise to the occasion.
Oh, and 100%.
Yeah, I think that the more experience, the more you, again, teach them and give them that responsibility, they can do it. And so we've done that our whole lives. Like, honestly, my kids are now, they're old. They're like 11 and 13. And it makes me so sad to say that, oh my God, they're already that age. But since they were young, we've continually gotten so many comments around, wow, they like can make their own food. They make their own lunches. They make their own breakfast. They get up in the morning. They make full-fledged, like 6-component breakfast. They know how to do, like even manage their time in the kitchen. Like they amaze me, honestly. And it's all because, I truly believe anyway, it's all because we got them in the kitchen early and it was frequent. So, and I'm not saying this has to be every single day. Like, listen, I totally get it. And I've been there and I know what it's like when you're rushed, when you're stressed, when you don't have time to add another 10 minutes to your meal prep or anything like that. But can you do it once or twice a week? Is that something that you can do just preparing the snack? Can you bring them into the kitchen and again, have them like tear the lettuce apart, or just even, you can prepare the food and just have them put it on the plate, like take a scoop and put it on, like anything, and make them feel like not only is it going to help with the picky eating, but it makes them feel like, wow, I can do this, gives them a sense of independence, gives them control over what they're making. And I'm telling you, when you have your kid in the kitchen, like, mark my words, help them, like, let them help you prepare something, and then they bring it over to the table, and then have them sit down. And then again, you don't have to say anything. You don't have to do anything, any special theatrics, just eat your meal. And I bet you they'll be more willing to actually eat what they prepared because of that sense of pride and control.
Absolutely. I'm so glad you're saying this, because I would say in my personal experience, when I think about just like bringing Bash in and allowing him to jump up in that kitchen stool and be the one to pinch the spices on the roasted veggies and help him glug the olive oil. And, I got him those plastic kitchen knives, and yes, the strawberries are cut in the middle. It's not like the stem off, but you're just like, all right, I'll cut this part for you. But like, just even giving him busy work that maybe isn't necessarily what I'm totally cooking, it doesn't really slow you down. Like, give them their cutting board, give them their knife. And you're just preaching to the choir. I swear. He will sit down and eat anything that he touches, but he is in charge of cooking. So such good stuff. Oh my gosh. I feel like I could talk to you for hours. I think I'd like to end today's podcast touching a little bit on snacks, because obviously mealtime, you make amazing, healthy, balanced plates, iron-rich plates. Your kids are involved. Everybody's, in the kitchen. You're looking at that as exposure to veggies and to foods that they never have eaten, and to flavors and all this good stuff. But let's talk about snack time, because snackcidents can happen with toddlers, and they like snacks. They like packaged goods. They know where the sugar is. They will find it in the pantry. How do we control that without controlling?
Yeah.
Too much. Okay. Yeah.
Amazing question. I don't want to say it's the number one problem, but maybe number two problem that parents of toddlers face. Snacks are like the most addicting, appealing concept for toddlers. And I honestly can't break the code as to why, but who cares? It just is.
I can't blame them. As an adult, how fun are snacks?
And that's it, right? So if you think about the types of snacks that majority of toddlers, at least in North America, are offered, we've got things like yogurt tubes, we've got goldfish crackers, we've got a granola bar, we've got maybe it's like a piece of cheese and blueberries or something. So it doesn't necessarily have to always come from a crinkly package, but it's kind of that fun, easy to eat, very palatable type of food.
Right.
And then you go again, let's say dinner time, and they've got a piece of salmon, and they've got broccoli, and they've got, whatever else, like potato wedges or something. Okay, that's very different. That is a lot of flavor. That is a lot of texture they've got to work through. That is not that easy to eat in comparison, right? And especially if we're offering them those crinkly food kind of snacks, those crinkly packaged snacks, that's like, it's like you can never compare.
Right.
So my biggest piece of advice, honestly, is put snacks and meals on a level playing field. And the way you can do that is by making them look more, one and the same. So I like to call snacks mini meals, because it's really truly what they are. So kind of going back to what you said about breakfast food has to be breakfast food. Snacks have to be snack food. Like, no, there's no such thing as like food designated for snack time. It's food. Like, it's all the same, right? So if you are making your snacks look more like what you'd serve at lunch or breakfast or dinner, then all of a sudden that appeal, the unnecessary appeal where they're eating past the point of fullness, where they're trying to open the cupboard or point to the fridge to open it because they really want that yogurt and they know it's in there, that's going to subside, right?
Give me the sugar tube, Mom.
Exactly, right? And so if they know and they come to expect meals and snacks sort of look the same, there's going to be a lot of variety. So again, I see a lot of times it is the same 2 to 3 snacks on repeat. right? And I get it too as well. Like it may feel like, oh my God, a whole other meal I have to meal plan or think about what I'm going to make or I have to prepare. But honestly, it doesn't have to be that hard. It's a mindset thing for sure. I actually just filmed a video on this last month and launched it in my membership. It's just showing people how quick it can be to prepare a mini meal. So let's say it's avocado toast, right? Like literally it takes 2 to 3 minutes to toast that piece of bread. And in the meantime, you just cut your avocado and mash it. And then the second it's out, like that's a 3-minute snack that it took to prepare. Or maybe it's a tuna or salmon, like a can of like wild salmon, open up your can, keep the bones in there because they're nice and soft anyway. You crush them up if you want, if you feel more comfortable, just take out that little centerpiece. You can mix it with like a mayo or a Greek yogurt or whatever. And then you can serve that again with toast or crackers or fruit or whatever. And it's done in probably, I think it was like 1 minute and 40 seconds. Like it was so quick, right? Yeah. So it's just a matter of getting in that mindset and thinking, or leftovers, right?
I'm all about that.
Yeah, it's same with me. So it's like, well, what did we have at lunchtime? Okay, I'm going to take that piece. Like maybe you're not always giving the same meal because you wanted to show up differently. Okay, no big deal. I'm going to take that chicken or I'm going to take that potato salad that we had and I'm going to add a banana with it. Like again, doesn't have to make sense or that's not even the most balanced of snacks, but you know what I mean? Like we've got something easy that you're putting out and that is going to help solve that problem for you where, to be honest, I personally think it's easier than having to constantly stock up on all these types of snack foods and then deal with the aftermath of kids wanting them all the time and only wanting them and refusing their meals.
Definitely. I totally agree. I love that so much. Mini meals moving forward. I'm always just like, yeah, it's a component of the Fab Four. You're balanced, you're good to go. But it's the highly palatable stuff that's hard for the adults. It's going to be twice as hard for the kids and it's twice as bad for them. So developing brains. Oh my gosh, Edwena, seriously, I could talk to you for hours. I love all that you're doing. Thank you for getting out there and making so many videos that are easy to understand on like sizing and techniques, because I think that's the rub. That's the rub for most of us is like, for me, I know I'm like, I know exactly the nutrients. I know exactly the foods I want to serve. And then Chris is like, our kids are going to choke. And I'm like, nope. Here's the size. I know it doesn't seem right. The bigger is actually safer. And it's people like you sharing videos like you do that really help all the moms and dads out there feel comfortable feeding their kids the good stuff, which in my opinion is the iron-rich proteins, those healthy fats, all the veggies. So thank you for all that you do. Where can people follow along? Where can they check out your courses? And we'll make sure all these links are in the show notes.
Thank you. So you can mainly find me on Instagram. I'm there every single day posting and doing Q&As and whatever. So that's at My Little Eater is my Instagram handle. And then my website is mylittleeater.com. And you can find blogs, tons of blogs on almost any topic. Just search in the search bar and you'll find a whole bunch of things that come up. And you can also find my baby-led feeding and feeding toddlers course on there.
I love it. Thank you so much. This was awesome. So great to see your face. I mean, I see it every day, but to talk to you face to face.
Thank you. It was so amazing being on here and talking to you too.
Thank you for listening to Be Well by Kelly. Please subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Learn more at bewellbykelly.com and follow me on Instagram at bewellbykelly. I would love if you picked up my books, Body Love and Body Love Every Day. They're sold on Amazon and at all major booksellers.